The stars above shimmered like scattered diamonds against the endless black canvas of space. Cale adjusted his helmet visor, squinting through the thick plumes of smoke that billowed around him. His ship, the Solace, was a charred husk now, its once pristine silver exterior reduced to molten metal and jagged edges. The crash had been sudden, violent, like being thrown into the maw of some cosmic beast. He remembered the alarms blaring, systems failing one by one. And then, nothing. Just darkness before waking up here, sprawled on alien soil beneath an unfamiliar sky. Cale groaned as he pushed himself up from the ground. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept him moving. Survival instinct kicked in. He scanned his surroundings. This wasn't Earth anymore. Towering trees with translucent leaves swayed gently despite there being no wind. Strange vines coiled lazily along the forest floor, glowing faintly with bioluminescent hues. The air smelled sharp, almost metallic, and it burned slightly when he inhaled too deeply. It was beautiful and deadly. A low rumble echoed in the distance, shaking the ground beneath his boots. Cale froze, gripping the sidearm holstered at his thigh. He didn't know what kind of creatures lurked here, but judging by the eerie silence broken only by occasional rustling sounds, they weren't friendly. That's when he saw her, or rather it. At first glance, she appeared humanoid, standing tall on slender legs, but upon closer inspection, Cale realized how different she truly was. Her skin shimmered like liquid mercury under the dim light filtering through the canopy. Delicate patterns resembling veins pulsed faintly across her arms and neck, shifting colors with every movement. Two large, almond-shaped eyes dominated her face, irises swirling with shades of gold and violet. She wore a form-fitting suit made of material Cale couldn't identify. It seemed alive, rippling softly as though breathing alongside her. She noticed him too, tilting her head curiously. For a moment, neither moved. Then, without warning, she raised a hand, palm outstretched toward him. A soft hum filled the air, accompanied by a series of melodic tones emanating from her throat. Cale blinked, unsure if this was communication or a threat. He instinctively reached for his weapon again, but stopped himself. Shooting blindly wouldn't help, not when he was stranded on an unknown planet with no backup. "Who are you?" he asked aloud, knowing she likely wouldn't understand. Instead of responding verbally, she stepped forward cautiously. Her movements were graceful yet deliberate, like those of a predator assessing its prey. Cale mirrored her actions, keeping his distance while trying not to appear aggressive. When she stopped just a few feet away, she gestured toward the wreckage behind him. Another series of musical notes followed, softer this time. "I don't speak whatever language that is," Cale muttered, raising his hand slightly in what he hoped was a universal sign of peace. "But I think we're both in the same boat." As if understanding his intent, she lowered her arm and tilted her head again. This time, she pointed upward, mimicking the motion of something falling from the sky. Cale nodded slowly. "Yeah, my ship went down over there." Cale watched silently, feeling oddly intrusive. Whatever this ship meant to her, it was clearly important. As much as he wanted answers, he knew pressing her now would do more harm than good. Instead, he focused on practical matters. Both ships were beyond immediate repair, that much was obvious. If they wanted to survive, they'd need shelter, food, and water. And given the hostile environment, teamwork might be their only chance. "Looks like we're stuck together," he said, breaking the quiet. She turned to look at him, her swirling eyes unreadable. "Guess introductions are in order. I'm Cale." He tapped his chest, repeating his name. "Cale." For a long moment, she simply stared. Then, slowly, she placed a hand over her own chest and made a sound. A deep, resonant note that vibrated through the air. It wasn't human speech, but Cale understood it all the same. That was her name, or at least as close to a name as she could give him. "Well, Vera," he said, testing the approximation aloud. "Let's see if we can figure out how to get off this rock." Vera tilted her head again, emitting a softer tone that sounded almost amused. Whether it was approval or skepticism, Kel couldn't tell. What he did know was that they were in this together, for better or worse. And as daunting as the thought was, it also gave him a flicker of hope. Together, maybe they stood a fighting chance. The first night on the alien planet was anything but peaceful. Kale and Vera huddled together near the remains of her ship, using its faint glow as both light and warmth against the creeping chill of the forest. The air grew colder as darkness descended, and strange sounds echoed around them. Low growls, distant screeches, and rustling leaves that suggested movement just beyond their sight. Neither dared to sleep fully. They took turns keeping watch, though neither trusted the other enough to completely let their guard down. Kale spent most of his time tinkering with pieces of salvaged equipment from the Solace. He had managed to retrieve a few tools before leaving the crash site, including a portable energy scanner and a small repair kit. His hands moved methodically, even if his mind raced with questions. What exactly was Vera? Where had she come from? And why did she seem so calm despite the danger surrounding them? Vera, for her part, remained enigmatic. She didn't speak, not in words Kel could understand, but her actions spoke volumes. She used her slender fingers to manipulate vines hanging nearby, coaxing them into forming makeshift barriers around their makeshift camp. When Kel raised an eyebrow in curiosity, she simply pointed to the glowing patterns on her skin, which pulsed gently in response. It was clear she shared some kind of connection with this world, one far deeper than Kel's own limited understanding. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them. They hadn't encountered any predators during the night, but the tension left them drained. Kale broke open a ration bar, chewing slowly while scanning their surroundings. "We can't stay here forever," he said aloud, more to himself than to Vera. "We need food, water, something better than rations." Vera tilted her head, studying him intently. Then, without warning, she stood up and gestured for him to follow. Reluctantly, Kale grabbed his pack and fell into step behind her. She led him deeper into the forest, moving with a confidence that bordered on eerie. Every so often, she would pause, pressing her hand against certain plants or trees. Some glowed brighter under her touch, others released small bursts of liquid that pooled at their roots. After several minutes, she crouched beside a cluster of bulbous fungi growing near a stream. Their caps shimmered with iridescent colors, almost hypnotic in their beauty. Kale hesitated. "Are you sure these are safe?" he asked, though he knew she wouldn't answer verbally. Instead, Vera plucked one carefully, slicing it open with a sharp fragment of metal from her ship. Inside, the fungus oozed a thick, translucent gel. She dipped her finger into it, then held it out toward Kale. Her swirling eyes met his, unblinking, as if daring him to trust her. With a deep breath, Kale touched the gel cautiously. It felt cool and smooth, not sticky like he expected. Tentatively, he licked his fingertip. To his surprise, it tasted sweet, vaguely fruity, and left a refreshing sensation in his mouth. Relief washed over him. "Okay," he admitted grudgingly. "You know what you're doing." Over the next few hours, they gathered supplies. Vera showed him how to extract clean water from the acidic streams by filtering it through certain moss-like plants. She also demonstrated how to identify edible fruits hidden among the foliage, using subtle changes in bioluminescence as markers. In return, Kale taught her how to use his energy scanner to detect potential hazards, like patches of ground hiding carnivorous root systems or areas emitting toxic gases. Their teamwork began to form a fragile rhythm. Still, communication remained a challenge. While Kel struggled to interpret Vera's melodic tones and gestures, she seemed equally puzzled by his reliance on spoken language. Frustration bubbled between them occasionally, especially when misunderstandings arose, but necessity forced them to persevere. Each day brought new trials, and each trial pushed them closer to survival and perhaps understanding. One afternoon, disaster struck. As they ventured further from camp, a massive creature emerged from the shadows. a towering beast with 6 legs, jagged spines lining its back, and eyes that glowed red with predatory intelligence. Its roar shook the ground beneath their feet. Without hesitation, Vera grabbed Cal's arm and yanked him backward, dragging him toward a nearby tree with thick, twisting branches. She scrambled up effortlessly, her movements fluid and precise, while Cal followed clumsily, nearly slipping twice. Once perched high above the ground, they watched as the creature sniffed around below, its tail lashing angrily. For several agonizing minutes, they held their breaths, praying it wouldn't spot them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the beast lumbered away, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. Cal exhaled sharply, his heart pounding. That was too close, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Beside him, Vera emitted a soft tone, almost soothing in its cadence. He glanced at her, noticing for the first time how her glowing patterns had dimmed slightly, perhaps a sign of stress or fear. "Thanks," he said quietly, meeting her gaze, "for pulling me out of there." She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his gratitude. There was no smugness in her demeanor, no sense of superiority, just quiet resolve. In that moment, Cal realized something important. Despite their differences, they were equals here. Alone, either of them might have fallen prey to the dangers of this unforgiving world. Together, however, they stood a fighting chance. As they climbed down from the tree and resumed their journey, Cal couldn't shake the feeling that their partnership was becoming something more profound. Trust wasn't easy to earn, especially between strangers from vastly different worlds. Yet every shared glance, every silent act of cooperation, brought them closer. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't so different after all. The days that followed were a blur of survival and discovery. Cal and Vera fell into a rhythm, each relying on the other's strengths to navigate the planet's relentless challenges. The forest around them seemed alive in ways neither could fully comprehend. Plants shifted position when they weren't looking, vines coiled protectively around certain areas, and the ground occasionally trembled as if the planet itself were breathing. It was a world teeming with secrets, both beautiful and dangerous. Cal found himself marveling at Vera more often than he cared to admit. Her connection to this alien environment was uncanny. She moved through the wilderness with an ease that made him feel clumsy by comparison. He watched her once as she knelt beside a cluster of glowing mushrooms, humming softly under her breath. The fungi responded almost instantly, their light brightening in sync with her melody. When she plucked one and handed it to him, he realized it was perfectly ripe and safe to eat. How she knew these things remained a mystery, but it was clear she belonged here in a way he never would. For her part, Vera observed Cal with equal fascination. His reliance on tools and gadgets intrigued her. She had seen his species before, briefly, from afar, but never up close. Humans struck her as chaotic, driven by emotion rather than logic. Yet there was something admirable about Cal's determination, his refusal to give up even when hope seemed lost. She noticed how he carried himself differently now compared to when they first met. The fear in his eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet resolve. Perhaps, she thought, humans weren't so different after all. Their bond deepened during moments of stillness when the constant struggle for survival gave way to brief respites. One evening, as they sat beside a bubbling stream, Cal attempted to bridge the gap between them. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said, breaking the silence. Vera tilted her head, her swirling eyes locking onto his face. "I mean, you know this place like it's part of you. And I don't even know where to start." Vera didn't respond verbally, but her bioluminescent patterns shifted subtly, pulsing in gentle waves. To Cal, it felt like reassurance, a silent promise that they were in this together. Encouraged, he continued, "Back home, people always talk about aliens like they're monsters or gods. But you're just you. You're trying to survive, same as me." She reached out then, placing a hand lightly on his arm. Her touch was cool but oddly comforting, sending a shiver down his spine. For a moment, he thought he saw something flicker in her expression, not quite a smile, but close enough. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact, and it left him speechless. Their growing connection was tested soon after. While exploring a rocky ridge overlooking the forest, they stumbled upon a nest of spider-like creatures. Each one was the size of a small dog, with multiple legs ending in razor-sharp claws. Before they could retreat, the creatures scuttled toward them, clicking menacingly. Kale fumbled for his weapon, but the spiders were fast, closing the distance in seconds. In the chaos that followed, Vera acted without hesitation. She stepped in front of Kale, raising her arms in a defensive stance. A shrill note erupted from her throat, high-pitched and piercing. The sound seemed to disorient the creatures, causing them to pause momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Kale aimed his blaster and fired, striking one of the spiders squarely in its glowing eye. It collapsed with a hiss, and the others scattered, retreating into the shadows. When the danger passed, Kale turned to Vera, his heart racing. "Why did you do that?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and awe. "You could have been killed." Vera lowered her arms, her patterns dimming slightly. She emitted a soft tone, almost apologetic, before gesturing toward him. It was clear she had acted instinctively, putting herself in harm's way to protect him. Kale stared at her, overwhelmed by a surge of emotions he couldn't name. Gratitude, guilt, admiration, they swirled inside him like a storm. That night, as they rested beneath the dual moons, Kale couldn't shake the image of Vera shielding him. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of it. Why had she risked her life for him? They barely knew each other, separated not only by species but by entire worlds. Yet her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. She trusted him, or at least she was beginning to. As they lay side by side, gazing up at the stars, Kale felt a strange warmth spread through him. Despite everything, the crash, the dangers, the uncertainty, he realized he wasn't alone anymore. Vera's presence grounded him, reminding him of what it meant to truly rely on someone else. For the first time since landing on this deadly planet, he allowed himself to hope, not just for survival, but for something more. The moons cast their silvery glow over the landscape, bathing them in light. In that moment, surrounded by beauty and peril, Kale understood that their journey was about more than escaping this alien world. It was about finding common ground, forging connections across impossible divides, and maybe, just maybe, discovering a bond that transcended words. The next morning brought a change in their routine. Kale and Vera had grown accustomed to wandering aimlessly through the forest, searching for resources while avoiding danger. But today, something felt different. The air carried an electric charge, and the usual hum of the planet seemed louder, almost resonant. Even the plants appeared restless, their bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. Kale noticed it first, a faint vibration beneath his feet as they walked. He paused, crouching low to place a hand on the ground. "Do you feel that?" he asked, glancing at Vera. She nodded sharply, her glowing patterns shifting into rapid pulses. Whatever was causing the tremors wasn't natural, or at least, not entirely. Curiosity outweighed caution, and they followed the source of the vibrations deeper into the forest. After nearly an hour of trekking, they stumbled upon something extraordinary. A massive structure partially buried beneath layers of moss and vines. It looked ancient, its surface covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly with the same iridescent hue as the fungi they'd eaten days before. The design was unlike anything Kale had ever seen. Geometric shapes intertwined with flowing lines, suggesting both precision and artistry. Vera approached the structure cautiously, running her hands over its surface. Her melodic tones filled the air, softer now, almost reverent. When she pressed her palm against a section of the wall, the carvings lit up brightly, illuminating the surrounding area. A low hum emanated from within, growing louder until the ground shook again. Suddenly, a hidden doorway slid open, revealing a dark passageway leading underground. Cale hesitated, peering into the abyss. "You think this is safe?" he muttered, more to himself than to Vera. She didn't respond verbally but stepped forward confidently, gesturing for him to follow. With a resigned sigh, Cale adjusted the strap of his pack and fell into step behind her. Inside, the air was cool and damp, carrying a metallic tang that made Cale's nose itch. The walls were lined with more glowing carvings, casting eerie shadows across the narrow corridor. As they ventured further, the carvings began to form images, scenes depicting what appeared to be the planet's original inhabitants. Tall, slender beings with elongated limbs and radiant eyes moved gracefully among lush landscapes, tending to strange machines and towering structures. They seemed peaceful, almost ethereal, yet there was an underlying tension in the depictions, as if warning of impending doom. At the end of the corridor, they entered a vast chamber dominated by a central pedestal. Floating above it was a holographic projection of the planet, rotating slowly as streams of light pulsed through its core. Surrounding the pedestal were smaller displays showing fragments of information, maps, schematics, and text written in an unfamiliar script. Cale stared in awe, his mind racing with possibilities. "This must have been some kind of control center," he murmured. "But who built it? And why?" Vera moved closer to one of the displays, her fingers tracing the glowing symbols. Her patterns flared brightly, syncing with the display's rhythm. Whatever she was doing, it seemed instinctive, as though she recognized elements of her own culture within these ruins. For the first time since they'd met, Cale sensed hesitation in her demeanor, not fear, but reverence mixed with unease. Suddenly, the chamber came alive. The hologram expanded, filling the space with vibrant colors and sounds. Images flashed before their eyes. The planet thriving under the care of its creators, then slowly deteriorating as experiments went awry. Machines designed to enhance life spiraled out of control, consuming everything in their path. The final scene showed the inhabitants fleeing, leaving behind only remnants of their once great civilization. As the hologram faded, a new presence emerged, a towering figure composed entirely of shimmering energy. Its voice boomed through the chamber, speaking in tones neither human nor alien but somehow understood by both. "Intruders," it declared, its gaze locking onto Cale and Vera. "You trespass upon sacred ground." Cale instinctively stepped back, raising his hands defensively. "We didn't mean to," he started, but the entity cut him off. "Your arrival has awakened me. You seek knowledge, yet your actions endanger all." The figure turned its attention to Vera, its tone softening slightly. "Child of the stars, do you comprehend the weight of what lies here?" Vera stood tall, meeting the entity's gaze without flinching. She emitted a series of melodic notes, her patterns glowing fiercely. Though Cale couldn't understand her words, he sensed defiance in her posture. Whatever this guardian was, she wasn't afraid of it. The entity regarded them silently for a moment before continuing. "Leave this place, or face the consequences." With that, it dissolved into a haze of light, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Cale exhaled sharply, turning to Vera. "What just happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, but her expression told him everything he needed to know. This discovery was far bigger and far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. As they exited the chamber, Cale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ruins held answers, yes, but also risks they might not be prepared to handle. Still, one thing was certain. Their journey had taken a dramatic turn. What secrets lay buried beneath the surface of this planet? And what price would they pay to uncover them? The weight of their discovery pressed heavily on Cale and Vera as they left the ancient ruins behind. The glowing carvings faded into darkness, but their implications lingered like an unspoken promise or a looming threat. Neither spoke as they trudged back through the forest, each lost in their own thoughts. The Guardian's warning echoed in their minds, raising questions neither dared to voice aloud. Was it truly protecting something sacred? Or was it guarding knowledge too dangerous for anyone, even its creators, to wield? Cale couldn't stop thinking about the holograms, the rise and fall of an advanced civilization brought low by its own hubris. It reminded him uncomfortably of humanity's trajectory, always reaching further, pushing boundaries without considering the consequences. We're not so different from them, he muttered under his breath, glancing at Vera. She walked beside him silently, her bioluminescent patterns dimmed, almost subdued. For days, tension simmered between them. The ruins had changed things. How could they not? Before, their partnership had been built on necessity, two strangers bound together by survival. Now they carried the burden of shared secrets, secrets that weighed more than supplies or weapons ever could. Cale began to notice cracks forming in their fragile alliance. Small disagreements over which direction to take or how best to ration their dwindling food supply sparked heated exchanges. One evening, after another fruitless search for shelter, Cale snapped. "Why won't you just tell me what you know?" he demanded, frustration boiling over. "That thing back there, it talked to you, didn't it? Like you understood it somehow." Vera turned to face him, her swirling eyes narrowing slightly. She emitted a sharp tone, her patterns flaring in response. Though Cale couldn't understand her words, her meaning was clear. She was tired of being questioned, of being doubted. "I'm not accusing you," Cale said quickly, softening his tone. I want to help. We're in this together, remember?" Her expression softened, but only slightly. She gestured toward the horizon, where storm clouds gathered ominously. Another night out in the open would leave them vulnerable, not just to predators, but to the planet itself. They needed answers, and soon. Yet every step forward felt like walking deeper into quicksand, uncertainty pulling them down. The breaking point came when they stumbled upon a clearing filled with carnivorous plants. These weren't ordinary predators. Their massive, toothed petals snapped shut with alarming speed, devouring anything unfortunate enough to wander too close. Cale suggested skirting around the area, but Vera insisted on cutting through, her confidence unwavering. When he hesitated, she shot him a look that bordered on exasperation. "Fine," Cale relented, gripping his blaster tightly. "But if we get eaten alive, don't say I didn't warn you." They moved cautiously, timing their steps carefully to avoid triggering the plant's reflexes. For a while, it seemed like Vera's plan might work. Then, disaster struck. A vine hidden beneath a pile of leaves lashed out unexpectedly, wrapping around Cale's ankle and yanking him off balance. He cried out, firing blindly at the plant as it dragged him closer to its gaping maw. Panic surged through him as he struggled against the vine's grip. Just as the plant's teeth began to close around his leg, Vera leaped into action. Emitting a high-pitched note, she grabbed a jagged rock from the ground and hurled it at the vine. The sound disoriented the plant long enough for her to sever the tendril with precise strikes. Freed, Cale scrambled backward, his heart pounding wildly. "You saved me again," he panted, staring up at her. His voice was hoarse, trembling with both relief and shame. "Why do you keep doing that?" Vera knelt beside him, her glowing patterns flickering softly. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. Her touch was cool, grounding, and carried none of the judgment he feared. Slowly, she hummed a soothing melody, her gaze steady and unwavering. It wasn't forgiveness, it was understanding. In that moment, Cale realized how foolish he'd been. Their differences hadn't created the distance between them. His mistrust had. Whatever secrets Vera held, whatever connection she shared with this world, they didn't diminish her loyalty to him. If anything, they made her sacrifices all the more profound. That night, as they rested under the stars, Cale broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his words carrying the weight of sincerity. "I shouldn't have doubted you." Vera tilted her head, studying him intently. After a pause, she emitted a soft tone, almost melodic in its warmth. It wasn't absolution, it was acceptance. And for now, that was enough. Their renewed trust became their anchor as they prepared to confront the Guardian again. Using fragments salvaged from their ships, they devised a plan to create a decoy signal, one strong enough to lure the entity away from the ruins temporarily. If successful, they could access the core chamber and retrieve tools capable of repairing their vessels. But the risks were immense, and failure meant certain death. As they worked side by side, assembling makeshift equipment and rehearsing their strategy, Kale felt something shift within him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Somewhere along the way, Vera had become more than an ally. She was someone he cared about deeply, someone worth fighting for. Even if their paths diverged once they escaped this planet, he knew their bond would remain. When the time came to execute their plan, they stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they stepped into the unknown, driven not by desperation but by hope, a fragile, flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. The repairs took days, though neither Kale nor Vera kept count. Time blurred into a haze of effort and exhaustion as they worked tirelessly to restore their ships. The ancient tools retrieved from the ruins proved invaluable, allowing them to patch together critical systems that would otherwise have been beyond repair. Yet progress came at a cost, both physical and emotional. Every hour spent laboring over damaged machinery reminded them of how fragile their situation remained. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and everything could unravel. Kale focused on the Solace, pouring all his energy into reviving its engines and navigation systems. His hands were calloused and stained with grease, but he didn't care. For him, fixing the ship wasn't just about escaping this deadly planet. It was about proving to himself that he hadn't given up, that he could still fight for survival, even when hope seemed distant. He often glanced toward Vera, who worked silently on her own vessel nearby. Her movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as if repairing her ship was more than a task. It was a ritual, a connection to something greater. Vera's ship, sleek and organic in design, responded differently to the repairs. It pulsed faintly under her touch, glowing brighter whenever she completed a section. To Kale, it seemed alive, almost sentient, mirroring Vera's emotions in subtle ways. When frustration crept into her expression, the ship's light dimmed slightly. When she smiled, or at least what Kale interpreted as a smile, the glow intensified. Watching her work filled him with awe. She wasn't just repairing a machine. She was healing a part of herself. Despite their focus on their respective tasks, moments of quiet camaraderie punctuated their efforts. They shared meals beneath the dual moons, sitting side by side as they watched the stars twinkle above. Conversations were sparse, not because words failed them, but because silence had become comfortable. Sometimes, Kale would catch Vera staring at him, her swirling eyes unreadable yet warm. Other times, she'd hum softly, her melodic tones weaving through the night air like a lullaby. In those moments, Kale felt a strange sense of peace, a fleeting reminder that they weren't alone, even in the vastness of space. Finally, after countless hours of labor, both ships were ready. Standing beside their vessels, Kale and Vera exchanged a long look. Neither spoke, but the weight of unspoken feelings hung heavy between them. This was it, the moment they had been working toward since the crash. Yet now that it had arrived, neither seemed eager to let go. "You don't have to leave," Kale said suddenly, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I mean, we could find another way. Together." Vera tilted her head, studying him intently. Her patterns flickered gently, conveying a mixture of gratitude and regret. She stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on his arm. Then she emitted a series of tones, soft, melodic, and achingly beautiful. Though Kale couldn't understand the exact meaning, he felt it in his chest, a bittersweet ache. She was saying goodbye. "I know," he murmured, swallowing hard, "but promise me one thing." He paused, searching her eyes. "When you get back to your people, tell them about us. About Earth. Maybe there's a chance, for understanding, for peace. Vera nodded slowly, her expression solemn. She reached out, touching the side of his face briefly before stepping away. Her gesture carried more weight than any words ever could. A silent vow, a bond forged in adversity and trust. With a final glance at each other, they boarded their ships. The engines roared to life, vibrating beneath their feet. As Cale guided the Solace into the sky, he glanced out the viewport, watching Vera's ship ascend alongside his. For a brief moment, their trajectories aligned perfectly, two streaks of light cutting through the atmosphere like twin comets. As the planet shrank below them, Cale allowed himself a small smile. Their journey had been fraught with danger, sacrifice, and uncertainty, but it had also been transformative. He had started as a lone survivor, desperate and afraid, but he was leaving as someone changed. Someone who believed in connection, in trust, in the possibility of bridging divides, even across galaxies. Vera, too, reflected on their time together as her ship entered orbit. She thought of Cal's determination, his kindness, his unwavering belief in hope despite overwhelming odds. Though their worlds were vastly different, she knew she would carry the memory of him forever, a spark of humanity amidst the stars. As their ships parted ways, heading toward separate destinations, the dual moons of the alien planet aligned perfectly, casting a radiant glow across the horizon. It was a fleeting moment of beauty, a reminder of the delicate balance between chaos and harmony. In that instant, both Cale and Vera made the same silent promise. No matter where their journeys led, they would honor the bond they had formed. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as symbols of unity in a divided universe. And though their paths diverge, their shared experience would remain etched in their hearts, a beacon of hope shining brightly against the endless expanse of space.